To be a phosphorus physician, for instance, homeopathically, dangerous and wonderful. Wonderful in the fact that you will pick up every nuance of emotion in your patient. You will have quick rapport. You've got a way of going through boundaries. When you think of phosphorus, you realize, think of mercury with its many isotopes, and phosphorus with its ability to suss up people and to feel the vibration coming from people, the ambiance of objects. You give, for instance, to a psychometric reader just a handkerchief that you've had or a garment, and they will be able to do a diagnosis from it, a psychic diagnosis, which is known as psychometry. My father was remarkable in that. I remember when I used to go shopping with him, and often with my mother and sister would be off buying things, and you know, the men stand waiting whilst this buying is going on. And Dad would point out certain people walking past me, and he could read auras. So he could see the chakra system demonstrated in the auric colors of the patient or the person. And he would pick up on diagnostic pointers. And we used to spend quite some time doing this. Adani was asking me, how did it come into your life to look at the archetypal pictures of a remedy like phosphorus in this particular way? Because it's not in the books, and not everybody approaches it in this particular way. And I just grew up with it. It's not a virtue at all. I just grew up with it, and this was the way one looked at the world. My father could penetrate beyond the external features of what is presented. He was able to see the energies lying beyond. He could go through the looking glass. If we think of Lewis Carroll and Alice, you can walk into that dimension which is actually projecting and holding together the concrete world that we have before us. Now, sensing ourselves in that light, that we are in actual fact physical bodies, only in the external sense of the word, and that we are drivers within this. This is a vehicle. You're looking at a person in a different way. And then you're looking at them archetypally, the type of archetype, and you're matching the archetype of the remedy to the archetype of the patient. It is a different way of looking. And also it is linked to dream analysis, because dreams speak this language. Dreams come from the other side. They come from the twilight world. That's why phosphorus dreams. And you can imagine giving that remedy accurately, you will get the dreams flowing, which we're going to have a look at with emerald. So it's a way of looking at life, and it is so wonderful for the physician to do so. But with phosphorus, hypersensitive, picks up very quickly, establishes a rapport rapidly, can sense even the patient's feelings, can suffer with them. That's the empathetic manner. The compassion, fortunately, most cases, passes, and that saves the phosphorus from being completely depleted. But some phosphoruses, of course, are drained by their patients. You're open to vampirism, if one can term it that. And I think we all know of people in our lives, people we have met, who are toxic. People we had possibly better sever connection with, or keep to a physician-patient role, and you cannot go closer because they have a deleterious effect upon you. And there are some patients where, always after a patient, washing of the hands. Now, this is a little factor about phosphorus, the washing. You'll notice in the rubrics, better by splashing the face with cold water. It pertains to all the phosphorus remedies, calc-phos equally. And I don't know if you have that experience, but in the morning you can get up tired, not completely refreshed. But once you've splashed your face with cold water, an invigorating effect that it can have. Inasmuch as you're phosphorus, you'll get an even greater effect. It really cleanses the mind. It's a major symptom, a major symptom. So washing, showering at the end of the day, and showering for a phosphorus, so much better than bathing. You don't want to be in the liquid that comes from you or off you. You need to be showering, cleansing, as rape victims do. And, there's something we must speak about in phosphorus. I must come back to it, even no matter we spend a little bit of time. But it's so important to understand that phosphorus is open to big problems. You know, that relaxed anal sphincter is a symbol of something. It's not just there. And apis is another remedy that can be sodomized, can be taken advantage of sexually, and not the big remedies, Staphysagria, Thuya, Bellis perennis, the remedies that we really think of when we're considering awful abuse. Lac caninum, another very big one. But here in Phosphorus, you've got another such. But coming back to this washing, the rape victim wants to shower. A bath is not good. You are lying in what you want you to get rid of, so that showering is so important. And this, for a phosphorus, a very important factor. Hypersensitive to people, and people can continue to drain them when they're out of contact with them, physical contact. Phosphorus, visiting a friend in hospital. Going into hospital, not a nice place for phosphorus, because you're taking on the ambiance and the vibration of many people suffering. Doctor, I went to the hospital and I was wasted. You see? And if you find yourself being affected by patients, and I have experienced it, phosphorus is a good remedy to break that. But a little bit about the phosphorus child and the evolution of the archetype. Most important, it comes from the fourth chakra. When we think of the fourth chakra, we're thinking of Mother Earth, Mother Ocean, Mother. When we think of mother, then, we're thinking of, as with nature Muir, the role of the mother in the upbringing and the vitally important period when there is total symbiosis between mother and child, when in fact the child is one with the mother. Esoterically, psychically, there is a flow, and the two are one person in a sense. We know that after 3 months, 4 months, this is weakening, and gradually the intellect starts to develop, cerebration takes place, and a sense of discreteness develops. A separation which Magcarb feels. Look at that abandonment, or this as if forsaken. Those rubrics are critical and fundamental to our knowledge of the homeopathic materia medica. We need to know the remedies that are to be found there, particularly those in black letter symptoms, black letter print and italics. Do note that your masculine and your feminine are represented as big remedies in that rubric. Aurum, solar, argenet or argentum met, lunar. They have to be present. Magcarb has to be present. Didn't Kent say to us, Magcarb is the remedy for the orphan, for the neglected, abandoned, rejected child. And so many of us, even sitting here within the wounded child sphere, there is a rejected child sitting with wounded scars that are still present and holding one back from actually progressing. You're held back at a particular phase of development through to some trauma that one experienced a long way back. So abandonment, rejection, very important. Now central then to the fourth chakra is love, and it is mother's love. Mother's love is unconditional, particularly. The pure love of mother is unconditional. It can be stern love. True unconditional love knows when to be firm, isn't it? There can be also tough love. It has to have that built into it to be that perfect love. Now, very often we find in phosphorus that the mother figure is predatory. The mother figure is taking, not giving. In other words, we have this pebble thrown into the pool of life, which is not giving, not loving, not sustaining, not nurturing, not enfolding and embracing. And the phosphorus archetype, the nature Muir archetype, as you know, also, the Magcarb archetype, they feel this. Mother was aloof. Mother was remote. Mother was autocratic. Mother was a disciplinarian. All I got from mother was rules and regulations and the house rules and so forth. Where was the warmth? Be aware the perception is important constitutional and archetypal fact. Mother could be pretty average and pretty good. But if the vision is distorted through ego filters, the individual, the archetype, can sense being neglected and rejected without it being true. We must understand that. But for our patient and for our prescribing, what the patient feels about the situation is more important than the truth. You know, we hear about false memory of rape, for instance. Yes, we must never encourage any such thing. Oh, I think with these symptoms, this would indicate there was some fiddling going along somewhere. One must know that this is so. But you are writing down this story that is coming out from the patient, and as they feel it, so we must look at it and subtract that which possibly some previous therapist has mistakenly and incorrectly probably imprinted to some degree. So one has to be careful of false memory, imprinted memory. But putting that aside, for Phosphorus, either the impression of not having mother's love, or in actual fact it not being there, and the mother being of a spiteful or predatory nature, taking rather than giving, creating a codependency possibly even, dependent on the child, rather than supporting and nurturing the child, this can lead to problems for Phosphorus. How does Phosphorus deal with it? Phosphorus splits. Phosphorus creates, they can fantasize and they have imagination. Therefore, they split off a part of themselves and create, you can create either an inferior other self or a superior other self. Does Thuya split? It does. And it fills the false ego with shame and guilt. And the other self which is created as a compensatory survival measure is in fact different, inferior. Lac caninum, different, inferior. In the case of Phosphorus, creates another self to compensate for this feeling of being rejected and being unloved. And if you're unloved, the conclusion of the child is, I am unlovable. Blame, self-blame. I am unlovable. I am unworthy. I am not worthy of love. Create the false self, and you make it different, superior. How do we know that? Look at the materia medica, look at the rubrics. I am wealthy. I am a superior being. I am aristocratic. I am of good birth. All sorts of imaginations. Think of China, how China thinks. The Walter Mitty syndrome, as it is known. So they put themselves in hero guise. What is this fostering? What sort of personality disorder comes from this? Narcissism. This is the beginnings, the budding of narcissism. In all the rubrics pertaining to platinum, where platinum is in black letters, and I've told you this before, next to it, because of the alphabet, stands Phosphorus. And how many times, I'm sure, looking in the repertory, have you noticed platinum in black letters and Phosphorus in black letters in the same rubric? And you know platinum. So, very important. The superior other self that they build up. Second, in the life of Phosphorus, there's an immense amount of syphilis in Phosphorus. Phosphorus is tubercular, therefore syphilis is secondary, Sora is primary. In syphilis, the miasm, Sora is secondary, syphilis is primary. I should say not primary because Sora is always primary, but shall we say dominant. And the Sora is recessive in syphilis. In tuberculosis, normally, syphilis is recessive and Sora is dominant. Hence, pseudo-Sora, as the ancients spoke of tuberculosis. Because of the syphilis factor, you will know that problems with both parents becomes very important. And very often we'll find in Phosphorus there were problems both with mother and father. And this can be very bad to a tremendous degree. We have in the history, and I've spoken of her before, Mary Bell. The mother was a prostitute, the father was an alcoholic, and actually disappeared out of the family. Mary Bell, of course, was abused, and eventually, her mother being a prostitute made use of her for her clients. The mind beggars belief, doesn't it? The thoughts of what transpired, what this child was exposed to. Inside the other self, the only way to survive is to see these people as less than yourself, to ennoble yourself, to see yourself as a better and more noble person. But inside the superior self harbored a rage, an anger, and a hatred. Huge. And fear. Of course, there are many emotions which will be harbored within that false self, which is protecting the real self. Or shall we say that within the real self is harbored these awful emotions, which the false self is, of course, hiding. This later will be made manifest. And in her case, she murdered 2 young boys. You remember the story. I've spoken to you about it before. These things are worth pursuing. The courts do not ask why. They ask, was it done? Did she do it? If she does it, then she is sentenced. And she was sentenced to high security prison, where, of course, she was abused by warders. So it goes on, the whole story. That's an awful story, but it is a phosphorus story. That harbored energy, that rage, that indignation can later manifest itself in sexual abuse. The victim becomes the perpetrator. This so often happens. In a woman, it can be the use of sex to get back, to get revenge on the masculine. In her case, she actually strangled the 2 boys. That's how bad it can become. There's a huge darkness in phosphorus, a huge dark area. And hence, again, this pedophilic tendency which we saw. But look back into how such things happen and the inadequacies which develop, which are then compensated for by this behavior, totally unacceptable, and yet always with positive intent regarding the archetype itself. Archetypes always act through positive intent. It can be totally destructive to the rest of the world. But do you think Adolf did anything other than a positive intent regarding his identity, his ego, who he was, for himself? He's acting out a protective strategy for inadequacies within his own personality. And it can be totally destructive. Now, these are very real energies in our phosphorus case. So number 1, the mother. Spiteful, distant, remote, and possibly even predatory, as in Mary Bell's case. Secondly, mother and father absent, so characteristic of the Mercury, the out-and-out syphilitic type. Phosphorus and Mercury are so close. So in both may be absent or difficult or traumatic for the young phosphorus child. The third, typical of the narcissistic, is the child who is adored by everyone. A child who is spoilt rotten, who is brought up surrounded by praise and oohs and ahs, often very beautiful, often very talented, and surrounded by unconditional love, no matter whether they're naughty or bad, love. That is destructive. Eventually we find that there is a sense of entitlement which develops in that child. Entitlement, and that they should be looked after at that same level by other people. Then there is the expectation, the entitlement and the expectation. And then the exploitation to achieve that which you wish to receive, the spoiling, to hear the adulation, the flattery, and the favoritism. Those are the factors which we find within the family. Flattery constantly. What a lovely child you have. Oh, so intelligent, so talented. Oh, the dancing, the music. Oh, beautiful. Constantly, constantly coming in. The adulation, the favoritism, and the breaking down on, or shall we say, the creation of this narcissistic personality. Often we'll find it is in single children, very talented, very beautiful, many gifts. Or it can be parents who've been waiting for a child, there's been a problem with fertility, and finally we've got this child, or we've adopted a child. And it's not our child. Therefore we lavish even more on it. We feel obliged to. Isn't that so? This was some other woman's child, but we have this child in our care, and we feel doubly responsible. And this can build up this kind of person. You'll find it throughout the Phosphorus personality, these characteristics of the narcissistic personality disorder, which I would have left out if I hadn't just thought of it now. We need to remember that. It's a very important factor. So we have two major personality disorders here. We have the cyclothymic, and if you look through the diagnostic criteria of cyclothymia, hypomania, bipolar disorder, you will find all the symptoms there. The recklessness, the gambling, the promiscuity, the seeking for friendships, the seeking for reckless behavior and ways of expressing oneself, the gambling with life in many ways, and the problems that can arise. So it has all the characteristics of the bipolar, one of our major remedies, and then of the narcissistic personality disorder, which, as you probably know, can be extremely destructive. And your serial killer may emerge from your narcissistic disorder. And very often with the serial killer, look for all those symptoms of phosphorus with desire to kill, explosive anger, flying off the handle, and the sexual aspects, which are very powerful in phosphorus, huge sexuality. And if you remember, in the history of phosphorus, one of the first things they noticed about it was the venereal excitation. In other words, the sexual arousal. It's big, 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 big. Lots of masturbation here, lots of promiscuity. If you're thinking of multiple orgasms, if you're thinking of sexual, when you see the rubric, the innocent rubric, sexual excess, loss of seminal fluids, worse by loss of seminal fluids, we are talking about high sexuality which we, the average person, is not aware of and cannot even dream of, you know. Maybe if you're a China in the middle of the night, you could dream of it. But in actual fact, I have a patient at the moment, multiple orgasms and all the problems connected with that kind of constitution. It's interesting, if you're working on something, the patient will appear. And you get so much information for it, and you broaden your knowledge. It happens. It's all there in the Materia Medica. Phosphoric acid, if you read up phosphoric acid, and don't forget, Phos-Ac is a blown out, totally burnt up phosphorus. And very often, a phosphorus who's gone over the emotional top, over the precipice, into Phos-Ac. And you'll notice, they called it pollutions in those days, didn't they? Onanism and pollutions and wanting more sex after sex. Your libido increased after orgasm. Increased even more. When I say that, any remedy come to mind? Doctor, my sexual arousal is increased by having orgasm. I need more. The more sex I have, the more I need. Have you ever heard it said in practice? Not? Okay. Have you read about it? Any remedy you've heard of? The connection here is so important. Lycosa tarantula. Have a look at it. Lycosa tarantula. We have to dwell on these things. We have to know about them. And we have to inquire and hear. You know, to go into this very private territory, you have to become one with your patient. You have to earn the right to enter those secret halls within the patient, you know. And when you can be taken in there and to share it with respect and reverence, and you prescribe, you will, of course, cut through so much so quickly.
Dr. Lilley,
yes.
Could you explain, you know, when you said the archetype is always growing towards healing itself, but isn't the archetype actually the soul growth? So I don't understand that growth towards destruction when your archetypal pattern is actually where the soul needs to grow to for balance.
Right.
It's how you come into the world with that archetypal tendency.
Absolutely. Yes.
So why would it grow to destruction?
It doesn't. You don't grow to destruction. You decline into destruction. The archetype contains the full potential for individuation. It will always have a shadow or a dark side. And in studying your remedies, the beauty of the Materia Medica is a learning experience far superior to anything you receive in medical training. We've both been through it, so we know it's absolutely true. You learn more about human nature and human behavior from the study of the Materia Medica than you ever learned in psychiatry and psychology. Totally, absolutely. So the study of the Materia Medica, in fact, is a life experience. Now, we note very early on, and I'm only bringing you back, you've actually brought in a confusing element for yourself, but you do know that when you're studying the remedy, it is bipolar. It's bipolar. It has a nether region, and it has a sublime region. The archetype is the way in which you have moved through experiences. You come into life with experience. You have lived before. Now, maybe some people here even who do not understand or feel that reincarnation is a fact. For me, it's just seasons. There's a spring. There's a summer. There's an autumn. There's undoubtedly a winter, right? But I know there's a spring. And I know I'm closer to spring than you are. Wouldn't that be true? I must be. Because my winter is here, and winter is closer to spring than summer, in a sense. So it comes round. There are these cycles. To think, let me just dwell on that for a moment. Common to all philosophies, if there is a philosophy, unless dust to dust exists, there is a progress in life towards greater perfection. Now, we're all born under different circumstances, with different advantages or disadvantages. With this being the common understanding that each soul is on a journey towards perfection through developing love, primarily. And not just love, which is words, but through service. So it is physical, it is a doing love. That is so important. Knowing that, we realize that how can you reach the zenith of potential within one lifetime? That is an absolute impossibility, an absurdity, and unfair, because we've all got a different starting point. That would be involving ourselves in a race and all at different handicaps, which would not be fair. So it stands to reason, even just logically thinking about it, that life is continuous. And then also if you've had children, and you see the wonder of these children, and that there is a preformed being here, which material substance does not explain. Their natural abilities, their skills, their incredible achievements. There's been something that has been learnt before, and this is a continuation. It's a chapter in a story. Okay. Now, if we can just put that in, because that's all reincarnation is. It's not a religious matter. I believe it is a scientific fact, that there is this constant cyclic ascent towards perfection. And when we're speaking about reincarnation, not coming back as a dog or as a lizard or as a bug, that also is, superstition and primitive. It is something that ascends. And even I've reached the mellow golden years of my life. And I am fortunate at my age, now 77, to be, as you can see, passionate, right? Filled with energy. You have no idea the energy that boils in me, seethes in me. It's a passion. And I'm not putting this on. It is true. I live homeopathy. I breathe homeopathy. I exist for it. And I mean that. And it has served me well. It has given me so much. And it has given, above all, the ability to give to others. Now, just looking at my life, I can see the evolution within myself. Darnie's known me donkey's years. We've known one another well on 50 years, I would think. It's a long, long time. And we were just talking now of the shift within ourselves. And I've reached this period now where each one is valuable. Each one teaches you something more. And that is just a fabulous part of a longer life, if you can remain sharp and clear and continue to be active as I am within my profession, that you learn so much. But there is a dark side to me. Right. I have the option to honor that dark side or to honor the sublime side. The archetype within me is the medicine user. Isn't that right? In Dungeons and Dragons, they even have them. What is it, the magic user? It is the magic user. Even in these games that we have, they recognize the archetype. We're all aware of archetypes. People are fascinated by archetypes. I do believe that the way to teach homeopathy, and as I evidence it in my own teaching technique, it is the teaching of homeopathy through archetypal understanding. And of course, you hang on to that, your clinical knowledge, which is vitally important. I don't sidestep that, that's very important. But the archetype, each archetype, perfectly fashioned to the needs of the incoming soul. You come in as a magic user, but there is the black magic user, and there is the white magic user. So it's not that living through the archetype must lead you to destruction. You have freedom of choice. You see, you have been released from captivity of instinctive, primitive animal behavior. And you go out of the Garden of Eden. We speak of banished, but it isn't that. You have evolved to that point where you're transcending pure animal existence, but you're still taking the animal with you. Eh? That animal part of you is so important. And that is a part that is phosphorus. Phosphorus smells like a cat. Can smell like a dog. Smells. Now, what is the thing that phosphorus, in its sublime form of the archetype, here again, the transcendent form, is the blossom. And if we had to think of the plant giving blossoms, and blossoms lead to fruit, it is the bountifulness of Mother Nature expressing itself through that plant. In ourselves, the phosphorus within us is wanting to bring out the blossom. We see that after the World War, the fields of Flanders with the poppies. We saw it in London. We see it everywhere there has been destruction. Plants grow and flourish. So it is the same process within our archetypal life that we are striving always towards the blossom at the top, which is a spiritual enlightenment. What is the thing that phosphorus is most sensitive to? The fragrance of flowers. The allergy of flowers. It will be negative, positive, always polarities. It's always paradox. Does that answer it? Yes. You're born into the archetype, and the archetype has a downward staircase and an upward staircase. It is so sad when you ruin an incarnation by descending downwards. And it happens so often, particularly through imprinting and conditioning, the people you keep, the people you consort with. Keep good company.